What's up? Welcome back to the Barton and Bud Show. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for giving us your 5-star ratings. We've got a bunch of them. We appreciate every single one. We are plugging along. I'm about a couple weeks out from a baby. For those of you, plug the YouTube channel. For those of you that have watched this on YouTube, you might see me squirming a little bit. I'm having some back issues. But aside from that, Bud, we're good, man. How are you in your world down in Florida? You getting through this thing?
Yeah, man, we're just staying socially distanced and quarantined. And we are, speaking of feedback, we appreciate all the ratings and the feedback here, but we need some feedback for Barton. If any of y'all have made the executive decision to go from the Tahoe, from the Suburban to the minivan life, he's about to be playing zone defense exclusively. No, it's match zone. They're not just spot dropping here in the Simmons household, I'm sure. We need the feedback about the minivan life. What do y'all think about that?
I am actually very in favor. My wife is a little bit, she's got to look good in the pickup line. That's still on her mind. I'm saying let's just pull the Band-Aid off and go full on family of 5 here, minivan this thing, and it's gonna make our lives a lot easier. But I think she still wants to, I don't know who she's trying to impress. I don't know if there's some teacher or dad somewhere that she's trying to catch the eye of, but we're resisting the minivan. It sounds like.
I assume she does not listen to the show. Are there luxury minivans out there? Are there differences between like just standard minivans and nice ones? Because like the SUV category, there's kind of basics, and then you got your nice Ranges and your G wagons and whatnot. I don't know.
I don't know, man. Give me wood grain. Give me.
You want the paneling?
Just give me something that works. That's all I care about. Let's get these kids around, and we don't have to worry about it.
No doubt. All right. So speaking of driving, Barton, you put out an article today on 247sports.com.
There's a segue. Yeah,
Look at that.
The bus drivers.
So Barton has a piece. He's going to let you know. He took my blue chip ratio team, so the teams that as we know, had done the kind of the minimum recruiting needed to win a national title. Not a guarantee to win a national title if you had the blue chip ratio, but if you don't, it's pretty much a guarantee that you won't win one in this given year. And he took and he kind of looked at an additional piece of what you probably need to win one, and that's quarterback play. And so Barton, just kind of walk us through this here. Ultimately, you arrived at the conclusion of whether certain teams had a bus driver or a fighter pilot as their QB.
That's right. And so I think, admittedly, I in order to just sort of finish off a little anecdote, a little color for this thing, I didn't do the full research. But part of the reason for my belief that you need, like, the idea of this is to continue to whittle down the actual contenders for a national championship. You gave us the 15 names in the blue chip ratio that allow you to contend for a national championship. And that's great. But here's, like, all of a sudden, I think in modern football, there is an additional barrier of entry to a national championship trophy, and that is a quarterback that is elite. And what I thought was really interesting, so like when you think of, I kind of threw a little bit this story, but like think of the early BCS championship days. First 6 quarterbacks to win a BCS championship were T. Martin, Chris Winkie, Josh Heupel, Ken Dorsey, Craig Krenzel, and Matt Mock at LSU. Like, Winkie started a year in the NFL. There are a couple of those other guys that started a handful of games. They all got drafted because, hey, they all just got done leading a team to a national championship. But none of them really had what you would call a successful career in the NFL. And none of them, despite winning a national championship, were high draft picks. The earliest draft pick was Chris Winkie in the 4th round. So as the game has progressed, you spatter a few Matt Leinerts and Vince Youngs and Tim Tebow's and Cam Newtons in there. You still get a few Greg McElroys and AJ McCarrons and even a Chris Link alongside Tim Tebow. But generally, like, the game has started to progress towards the necessity of an elite quarterback. But then you get to the most recent era of college football, and Jacob Coker is the last bus driver, I would say, to win a national championship. He did it behind a Heisman Trophy winning running back in Derrick Henry and a roster at Alabama that was the most talented roster in the country. But since then, you've got Deshaun Watson, Tua Tagovailoa, and again, I know Tua didn't go into the game as the starter, but his entrance into the game is what allowed Alabama to win. Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow. Lawrence hasn't been drafted yet, but he will be a first rounder. So those four, Deshaun Watson, Tua, Trevor, Burrow, the last four quarterbacks to win a national championship are all, at this time next year, will have been first-round draft picks. And this is where I didn't do the full research here, and so maybe someone can help me out. But I don't think, certainly not in the modern era, and I'm not sure that that ever, like in the history of college football, has there been 4 consecutive national championships that were quarterbacked by a first-round draft pick. So if anyone wants to do the legwork for me there, if anyone wants to do the, check me on that. But I couldn't
put it on
find
Twitter
it.
right now, and
Yeah.
maybe by the end of the episode, people will be able to tell us.
Yeah. But the point, as you compose that tweet, the point in saying that is, I think that this is a new era, and this is a new era where, as it relates to the necessity of a quarterback because of offenses and because of the how many points you need to score. It's a new era because of the fluid nature of quarterbacks in terms of the transfer portal and the ability to transfer places and the willingness of quarterbacks to go and compete with established starters in front of them and potentially win jobs as underclassmen. Coaches are being more open to that. Coaches are also being, I think quarterbacks are more equipped to play early. And so, there's just a lot of factors that have created this environment to where this is a very quarterback-centric league right now. And also I think teams have the Nick Saban blueprint as well, in the sense that they know how important recruiting is. They know they know how to recruit at a high level. There's multiple teams now, I think, that are talented enough to win a national championship, where it used to be just like it was Alabama and then maybe LSU can cycle up, or like maybe Auburn has like a miracle season with Cam Newton. Like, it took some really weird things to happen for a team to have a chance against that Alabama roster. And now you got Ohio State that's talented enough. LSU's talented enough. Georgia's talented enough. There's Oklahoma. Like, there's a bunch of teams that are starting to raise their talent level. And so all that said, I think now more than ever, you have to have a what I call a fighter pilot at quarterback to win a national championship, as opposed to the days when you could win it with a really good roster and a bus driver that was just keeping things on track and just getting guys the ball and not making mistakes and being a leader and a manager and all those sort of things. I don't think that guy wins a national championship anymore. And we've seen it in recent years with guys like Kelly Bryant, Ian Book, Jake Browning. We've seen how some of these guys look on this national championship stage when they're head-to-head with a fighter pilot. And so that's the preamble. That's sort of the basis for this discussion. And so I just went down your list. I went down the blue chip ratio list, and I started to identify who's got the fighter pilots and who's got the bus drivers. So we can start right at the top, I guess, right?
Yeah, let's just. Why don't we just go one by one, and then I'll kind of throw some questions at you from these, and I'll say, just pretend like I'll be the comment section, and Barton,
yeah.
why in the hell did you pick this? Or hey, I agree with you. That's an obvious one, and let's go at it like that. Then I have a couple kind of general theme questions I want to throw at you too.
For sure. All right. So first one's up. Alabama. They're the top blue chip ratio program. They've got a fighter pilot at quarterback. Now here's the caveat there is I'm not actually saying that Mac Jones is a fighter pilot. I'm not saying he is one of these premier quarterbacks that's going to go in the first round that's got that kind of elite ability. But what I am saying is, and remember, like, the Joe Burrow phenomenon is present throughout this, in the sense of a guy that was good taking a step to elite. We couldn't predict it. It happened. So that could happen with any of these guys. And so I'm saying, yes, it could happen with Mac Jones. He could become an elite quarterback with an elite roster around him. I don't expect that to happen necessarily, but I do expect that if Alabama is in a position to compete for a national championship, he will have either taken that step or at some point, whether it's during the season or whether it's halftime in the national championship game, Bryce Young will have taken over. So if Alabama is hoisting the trophy at the end of the year, then either Mac Jones has become that dude at quarterback or Bryce Young is the one hoisting the trophy. Because I do think Bryce Young is a fighter pilot.
Okay, so I'm glad you clarified this, because when I first scanned this morning, I was in a meeting and I was looking over it and I was like, wow, Barton thinks Mac Jones is a fighter pilot. This is going to get the comment section stirred up because people are not going to read this. And then you clarified. That makes some sense. You have enough confidence in Alabama's position room that they will have a fighter pilot playing. So basically, if Mac Jones does stick, we think he will be a fighter pilot.
It's very much the Kelly Bryant, Trevor Lawrence phenomenon or scenario where Kelly Bryant was the starter. Kelly Bryant was going to have the opportunity to fight off Trevor Lawrence, and Kelly Bryant could have won every game. But I think at some point in the season, game 4 or so, Dabo Swinney said, I see what's going on elsewhere. I know what this offense can be. We've got to make the move to Trevor. And I think Jalen Hurts, by the end of his career at Oklahoma, was a fighter pilot. But early in his career, he was very much a bus driver too. And so it's the same thing with Tua Tagovailoa behind him. Like Jalen Hurts, all right, here's our bus driver, really good team. We got a good quarterback here. Jalen Hurts doesn't make any mistakes. He's going to – but ultimately he doesn't unlock our offense. And it took until the halftime in the national championship game for them to hand the keys to Tua. But ultimately, to win a national championship, that's what Nick Saban did. He handed the keys to the fighter pilot and said, take us home.
I like that precedent there with Nick having done that. I mean, if it's some coach who's kind of a little, old and stodgy and not willing to do that, maybe I don't know who you want to use as an example there, but yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Who do you have next?
So Georgia's next. This was, I'd say, probably one of my toughest decisions to make, and I went bus driver. And I'm working under the assumption that JT Daniels is not going to be eligible. I don't know that to be the case. I have to sort of pick a side in this discussion. And so with that said, I'm saying Jamie Newman is a bus driver. And I'm tempted to say, like, he's got some fighter pilot qualities. Like, he could take a big step this year, and Lord knows Georgia has the roster. We'll see if Georgia has the coaching to open things up. I don't know. But end of the day, I know he was at Wake. I know that at the end of the year, his top 2 receivers got injured. But I still look at what happened again at the end of the year against Virginia Tech, Clemson, Syracuse, Michigan State. He just wasn't a guy that did put a team on his back. Because that's sort of what I'm asking. Like, can the fighter pilot put someone on his back and elevate them? And he didn't really do that when he was up against it late in the year last year. And so I hold that against him in this discussion. I think there's potential for him to burst through, but I don't think there's enough proven there to count on that. I will say, though, I think if you throw JT Daniels in there, there's a little bit of an Alabama element where it's like, I don't necessarily think that JT Daniels has proven to be a fighter pilot yet. I don't necessarily think that Jamie Newman has proven to be a fighter pilot yet, but collectively, I feel like there's a better chance one of them, if they're competing with each other and emerges from that, has a like, if they're both I don't know, you're the numbers guy. Like, if they're both sort of 60% chance of being a fighter pilot, and you combine the percentages, and then sort of, I don't know what the collective, maybe it's a 70% chance that one of the two will be a fighter pilot.
Right.
So I think that's sort of my perspective on Georgia.
I actually totally agree with that. I just got done interviewing Steve Palazzolo of Pro Football Focus for our social distance series, and PFF they love Jamie Newman, and
Yeah.
they think he is awesome. I'm somewhere between PFF and our Florida Gators 24/7 Sports Board, who thinks he's like one of the worst players ever to step on a college football field. So I'm hopeful. Like I think the guy is going to be pretty good for them. I'm not quite as high on him as PFF is, but I want to interject here because clearly I think the Alabama and Georgia calls were probably two of the more difficult ones that you had to make here. I would think, and then they just happened to come with the two most talented teams in college football per the blue chip ratio. So let me ask you this: like, I agree with this theory, and I think most likely we will have another fighter pilot breaking through. But aren't these also the two teams who have by far the best chance to do it without a fighter pilot? Just because of how much talent they amass elsewhere?
Well, yes, but I think that's because we have a couple fighter pilots out there. Like I think that's why that's not enough. So yeah, I do think that if someone's going to do it without a fighter pilot, it would be one of these two. But I am not confident that an Alabama roster with Mac Jones, with a bus driving Mac Jones, or an Alabama or a Georgia roster with a bus driving Jamie Newman. Let's just call Jamie Newman like, I don't know, sophomore Jalen Hurts or something.
Sure.
Like that level of player. I'm not I would pick an Ohio State, a Justin Fields led Ohio State or Trevor Lawrence led Clemson over those teams, even though I might give the edge in talent to Alabama or Georgia. That's why I think it isn't like, that's why I think we're in an age where, it's of importance that it didn't used to be. Like the quarterbacks aren't spattered all over the country. Like they're at the best teams.
I mean, just because of the rules, because of how easy it is to score points now. Like if you don't have a stud quarterback who can just take advantage of the modern passing offenses, yeah, I mean, I think it's a big negative. Who do we have next?
This is a short conversation. Ohio State,
Yeah,
Justin
okay.
Fields. Moving on.
Is he Iceman or is he Maverick? Like is Trevor Iceman and Justin's Maverick, or like they're rivals? So
I feel like Justin, his style might be a little more. I don't know. I think Trevor might be Maverick. Because Trevor, I mean, Justin was the one that didn't throw a pick until like the last game of the year. Basically, he's pretty even keel. Like Trevor actually was the one that was like trying to make all the big throws early in the season. The interception count was ticking up. The profile in terms of just like his longevity playing, freshman starter, like high school and college, all this stuff. Like you would think he would be Iceman, but I don't know. The style of play maybe was a little bit mavericky for Trevor last year.
That's an interesting way to argue that. I think you could also argue, like if you remember back in the movie Top Gun, and spoiler alert if you haven't seen a movie from the 80s, sorry. Like Iceman won Top Gun. Trevor won the national title as a true freshman. Maverick, like briefly quit, came back, barely graduates, doesn't win Top Gun, ends up being the star of the show because he ends up shooting that Russian MiG down, like when they're actually in a real war, and so he comes back after kind of pseudo transferring. Would you say maybe not succeeding right off the bat, and then finding success in a different venue? So like you could possibly argue that,
hey man,
maybe Trevor's Iceman.
Yes, I think that's it. I think we cracked it. Trevor is Iceman, Justin Fields is Maverick, and now I want to watch Top Gun again.
If you don't think I'm going to clip this and make it a VOD that I auto schedule to run on a Sunday, that's for sure. All right.
I hope we have a date. Surely our audience is Top Gun competent. Surely they're literate on Top Gun. I'll be really disappointed if there's a bunch of head scratching going on.
I based on our comment sections, I'm pretty sure most of these folks know about Top Gun.
All right, good.
All right, so who do we have next?
We got Texas next. This one, I sort of second nature allowed me to put Sam Ellinger as a fighter pilot, but I'm not sure how confident I am in it. The more I really he might just be a really good, like a really good bus driver that is going to get you close enough, but might not be able to get you over the hump. What do you think?
I think he's a fighter pilot. Now, he may not be like an NFL bound first round type pick, like the last 4 guys to win natties. Yeah, they've all gone first round. I don't think that Sam Ellinger is a first rounder, but I think by college quarterback standards, he can absolutely be a fighter pilot for you. Like he's not a Jacob Coker. I don't think he's just a caretaker. I mean, he's a guy who I do trust to be a pretty good player.
Okay, so I think this is like it is good to sort of clarify too, like for the purposes of this discussion, would you I'm trying to think of a good example. Like again, Jalen Hurts, I think he only hits fighter pilot status in his last year. Prior to that, his whole career was bus driver. Jake Fromm, bus driver. Even though he was drafted in whatever it was, 5th round. I mean, he's a bus driver. He's gonna not make mistakes. He's gonna get you squared away, but he's not gonna put you on his back. And so there's really good players that are bus drivers, and I think that Sam Ellinger falls in this category. Like the reason I lean fighter pilot for him is there is while maybe just the physical tools, the physical talent might not be there. Some of these other guys, like there is an element of Sam Ellinger. It's not hard to see him put a team on his back and grind out some yardage on the ground, make a few plays in clutch moments. Like he is central to Texas's success. He isn't supplemental to it. And so I think I've talked myself back into it.
Yeah, no, I think you made the right call there. Initially with Ellinger.
LSU, we're going bus driver here with Miles Brennan. That's not to say Miles Brennan won't be a stud, can't be a stud. But like someone's got to tell me like why I should be more optimistic than just really good player at this point. And maybe he's a bus driver this year and he's a fighter pilot next year. But first year starter, I'm having a little bit of a hard time seeing how you could, be that optimistic to be like, this dude is our next national title quarterback.
I think the only argument is this the total absence of LSU's, at least public absence, pursuit of a transfer quarterback, right? Like it just doesn't seem like they went out and tried to get anybody, and so they must have a lot of internal confidence in Miles Brennan. But I agree. You can't. I don't think you can make him a fighter pilot based on what we've seen so far.
No, and even as a high school kid, he was incredibly productive. He was really skinny. He was, I wouldn't call him like toolsy, I guess is the phrase you hear about, or the word you hear about a lot. He was more of just like a really crisp, accurate quarterback. And that is the, kind of the definition of a really good bus driver. So we'll see if he takes a big step forward or not.
All right. Who do we have next?
Oklahoma, Spencer Rattler, first year starter on the opposite end. Like first year starter, we haven't seen him, but I went fighter pilot here because he was the number 1 quarterback in the country 2 years ago. He is an elite talent. And I've seen it. I've seen him throw in person. He's got juice and he's got athleticism. He's got arm talent. He's got everything you want. And so I'm not saying that they're going to be title contenders with him. It is still his first year starting. But if it clicks, then it clicks pretty big. So we'll see when it hits, but he's got fighter pilot ability, I think.
I think that makes sense, and it's sort of a similar logic to the Bryce Young Alabama thing, right? Like he was our number one quarterback. It was a bit of a down year for quarterbacks that year, at least from what we saw as recruits. Although I think a couple of them are actually outperforming what we thought they would do early on. That's fair. I you'll probably get some pushback on that, but I think having seen him in person, he was the top guy that I saw that year as well. So I think that's fair.
All right, Clemson, Iceman
Yeah.
is a fighter pilot. Florida, you take this to start.
So I think Kyle Trask's a fighter pilot. I think he's pretty good. Now maybe I'm going to be wrong on that.
So okay, all right. So do you think that Kyle Trask at the end of the season is going to be? Look, if Kyle Trask is a fighter pilot, then that means that Florida is probably, at least in Atlanta, like at least in the SEC championship game, contending for the playoffs. Florida probably just went, I would say, 11-1 or better in the regular season. Kyle Trask is probably gearing up to be a first-round draft pick. If you think he's a fighter pilot, is that something you can envision as him being a first-round draft pick?
First round, I have a hard time seeing. I was all prepared to bet you that maybe I bet you like an oat milk white Russian that that he's going to be like a top 75 pick or something like that.
Okay.
Top 100
All right,
pick.
I'll give you a second rounder. I think third rounder, especially if you're third rounder starting to get into, is a third rounder going to in the national championship game out dueling a first rounder?
Probably not.
But a second rounder could. So I'll give you second round.
I think he might go second round. I mean, like
Okay.
there's three quarterbacks who I think you really like to get drafted this year. Like, are you that confident that Ellinger is going to go over him NFL wise? I'm not. Not as a thrower.
Right. No, not necessarily. But again, I think the way Ellinger's used, some of the intangibles, the run game element he brings, I think that there's like that's what put him over the top for like the fighter pilot tag for me. Trask is a fascinating one. I did bus driver, and I could see him taking a step forward. I could see him being a fighter pilot, but my vision for him is more of a like to me he was a game manager last year. Like he was a distributor. He was a kind of a John Stockton. Like
right.
He's not going to be the one like. I don't know. John Stockton's a Hall of Famer, so maybe people are going to push back on that comparison. But he was making the smart throws. He was delivering the ball on time. He was letting his receivers make plays. I think he's got to be more than that this year if he takes a step forward. And maybe he does, but I'm really interested in seeing that. That's probably, I'd say he's the second most intriguing guy to me on this list in terms of like the decision to make him a bus driver or fighter pilot.
The one game that I thought he looked really good in was actually their loss. Like he wasn't perfect against LSU, but he was really damn good and like made almost every pass when they had to have it. And they kind of went toe to toe with LSU for about. Did it get into the fourth quarter or was it more like 40 minutes of pretty close game? I know Florida, I think, had the lead at one point. But like I think he's pretty good, man. Is there another level that he can take his game to? I will say in that PFF social distance video, which y'all can watch on 24/7 Sports YouTube channel, Trask was one of the guys who PFF has highlighted as being one of the luckiest quarterbacks in the nation in terms of he had a very high percentage of throws which they graded as like turnover worthy, which did not end up becoming interceptions. And we know like you control your controllables. So what are you actually controlling? You're controlling like, are you throwing a ball that has a chance to be intercepted? Once it leaves your hand, you don't really control if the DB catches it or not. All you can control is where the pass goes. And so if they're right about that he had a probably unsustainably high number of throws which should have been picked that were not picked, maybe he doesn't improve this year. Maybe there's regression coming.
Yeah. And keep him. And I mean, I know they have Kadarius Toney coming back and Kyle Pitts and Trayvon Grimes, and like there's players, and Pitts is probably maybe a first round draft pick himself. And so I'm not saying that he's devoid of weapons, but it's a different room. It's fewer weapons, and it's more on him than it was
Jefferson's
last
gone.
year. Jefferson's gone.
Isn't Freddie Swaim's gone? I think.
Yeah, Swain's gone. Hammond's gone.
Cleveland's gone.
Cleveland's gone. So that's they threw the ball to a lot of different targets last year. So I'm not saying, like, again, there's experience coming back, but 3 of those guys got drafted. Like,
they
that's
also threw the ball to P. Ryan
insignificant.
40 times. Do you know that? 40 catches for a running back?
Yeah.
Like that's a lot of catches that are gone.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting
for sure.
Next up's Michigan. This is almost like a
bus driver.
Yeah, like it's just like Dylan McCaffrey to me is definitely a bus driver. Joe Milton, like the unknown of that. I guess we could see a fighter pilot emerge, but more likely, if that were to happen, that would happen in 2021 or something like that. Anyways,
Joe Milton will be a really good test of something we've talked about, and that's a lot of these coaches think they can coach accuracy into you, right? Like they look at it and they say, oh, this guy's got bad footwork or whatever, and we can make him into a more accurate passer. Maybe he holds the ball slightly different. Maybe his motion has something that you need to change about his stroke. I saw Joe Milton do some really freaky things like I saw him play a lot of 7-on ball down here, and like his high school numbers, the accuracy was a bit of an issue. I've also seen him do like a standing backflip at 6'5", 235. I was like, oh my gosh, like if this guy doesn't work out as a quarterback, he's pretty freaky athletically. Like this could be interesting. And, I've also seen him like literally from, 6 feet away, like a barely socially distanced pass going into the end zone, throw like a laser wrong shoulder a guy who's running the drag, had the ball hit off the guy's back shoulder and pop up in the air for a pick in 7-on, when all you need to do is just underhand the ball to the guy. So like for him, I think if Joe Milton can learn to complete the automatic pass, or the pass that good quarterbacks make automatically or almost all the time, if he can just do that, I think he has a chance to be a fighter pilot. But I'm just not sold that happens, because I've never seen him consistently make that throw. He makes some of the crazy difficult throws, but some of the misses that particularly bothered me about him, because I saw him play probably 5 or 6 7-on tournaments, right? Just the why misses. Like, why'd you throw it? Like, why? How is that ball placement there in 7-on? I totally agree. Until we see on the field that's improved, I think bus driver.
It's a good reminder, because you keep on hearing all this buzz about Milton being a stud, and like you kind of have to shake yourself and be like, don't forget, like he wasn't very accurate in high school. Like, let's just wait and see. Auburn, Bo Nix, maybe Chad Morris is the answer to Auburn's pass game. I don't know how to describe Auburn's pass game issues.
I do. Here, I have something for you. I had to dig this stat up last night. Where's this at? Here we go. In 9 games against winning FBS teams, Nix's passing numbers were awful. He had a passer rating of 108 and 5.6 yards per attempt. And he'll have to do that behind a completely rebuilt offensive line. So,
yeah, I just to me the tools aren't there for Bo Nix to be a fighter pilot. He's a good player, and maybe he's, if there's anyone on this list that's got a little Sam Ehlinger in him, like, okay, maybe tool lacking, but makes up for it in moxie, then yeah, maybe Bo Nix is that guy. But let's see, let's revisit when he's a senior then. But this year I don't see him out dueling one of the fighter pilots. Penn State, bus driver.
Yeah. Agreed.
Notre Dame, bus driver. You could like you could make a case that Ian Book is better than that. I've seen like Brady Quinn, and I know Brady's got some, he's a Notre Dame guy, obviously, but I saw him on one of those sort of Fox pregame show. They asked the Urban, Brady, Leinart, Bush, who the best three quarterbacks in college football are, and he had Book as number 3. So I guess like if you have really Notre Dame colored glasses, like there is a argument somewhere to be made that Ian Book can take a step forward, but we've seen bus driver out of him, and I don't trust in his 5th year in the program somehow he becomes something new.
We should make a rule that if Notre Dame has a fighter pilot, we'll know it, right? Like everybody will be talking about it. It's Notre Dame. Like the media would love for Notre Dame to have somebody that they could hype. Like if we're sitting here saying maybe, and even the people who cover Notre Dame are like, yeah, he's pretty good, but like he's certainly not like a first round lock type, then I think we're pretty safe to say bus driver.
Yeah.
Ian Book's not going in the first round.
No. Washington, that's a bus driver room. Maybe their FCS transfer, Kevin Thompson out of Sacramento State, is a revelation, but for now, we'll default to bus driver. USC, Keaton Slovis, are you in agreement that he's a fighter pilot?
I think I am. I mean, to be that good, to step in like that as a true freshman, yeah, dude, he's really good.
Yeah. And then the last one, which this is probably the most controversial one for me, Texas A&M. I went fighter pilot with Kellen Mond, and I will defend the pick here. Like,
okay,
I'm not saying Kellen Mond is like one of the elite top quarterbacks in college football. I'm not saying that he's a future first-round draft pick. I have serious issues with his consistency and trustworthiness, I'll say. But in this discussion, like in this debate, in this exercise, the idea is in part to identify like what someone is capable of based on what we've seen. And I do like Kellen Mond is probably objectively one of the most talented quarterbacks in the country. He is capable of making, like the way I put it in the story is, this fighter pilot could crash the jet into the side of the mountain, but at least he's got the tools to fly it. And so I think when you get in a big stage game like that, where you got to outduel Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence or somebody like that, Kellen Mond is not at a talent deficit there. Can like the good Kellen Mond emerge this season? I think I think you've got a chance there. There's going to be probably some ugly games, but I think he's got the horsepower in a big stage game to go toe to toe with somebody. Now he's got the horsepower to throw to lay an egg as well. But in terms of like the way this exercise is put together, like I would lean fighter pilot for Kellen Mond and say he's capable of putting up that kind of an effort.
So I actually put him on my most explosive players list. I was going through this, and if you take out the sacks, he had like 7.5 yards per carry last year against one of the crazy tough defenses or defensive slates out there. So I love the running and I love the arm. I agree with you. He makes some of these really tough throws. The problem is, and you might blame this on his receiver, so I think there's a window for you to be right here. I'm not going to say, like, Barton, you're crazy for this. I don't agree with this, but I don't think you're crazy for it. I just don't see him hitting guys in stride, right? Like, it feels like they're waiting for the ball. Like, I need him to just process and release a little bit quicker so that we can get the ball there a step quicker, because in that offense, like, it's not an offense that is going to scheme up a lot of free runners. It's an offense that it's designed to have an answer for any call the defense might want to make, right? As long as you just read the defense and make the read, you're going to have somebody open. But it's not really like kind of like a trick you offense where, you're going to have guys who are just, WTFO like Oklahoma does. And so precision and hitting guys in stride is really important. And I don't see him doing that often enough. He always seems kind of like a little tick late, just hitting them right as the defender gets there, as opposed to hitting them in stride and letting them run for the big one. So I think that's one of the issues I have with their lack of explosive plays. But look, if we can make Sam Ehlinger a fighter pilot, at least in college, I think you could argue that like if they used Kellen Mond the same way they used Sam Ehlinger, do we feel like we'd be a little bit higher on Mond? Because I do. Like if you ran Kellen Mond like you ran Sam Ehlinger,
Yeah,
I
that's
think
true.
I'd be even higher on Mond, because it's not
That's a
like
good
Ehlinger
point.
has a good arm. His arm is one of his weaknesses.
I think that's a good point. But also I'd add this too. Like this, the way this exercise is phrased, like I think both of these things can be true. I can both think that Kyle Trask is a better quarterback than Kellen Mond, but also think that Kellen Mond is a fighter pilot and Kyle Trask is a bus driver. Like, I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. And in fact, I do believe that. Like, I think Kyle Trask is a probably a better quarterback, but Kellen Mond's upside
Yeah.
is good enough to where he could roll into the playoff and be as good as anyone on the field. And I think that that's something that is a necessity in today's game at the quarterback position.
To go fantasy baseball draft analogy, right? Like Kyle Trask is the guy who I'm pretty sure I can draft. He's going to give me 30 homers and 100 RBI, but I'm not going to take him in the first round because he's not going to give me anything more than that, right? Like he's just that dude who gives me the same thing every year, who I know is pretty damn good. Kellen Mond's the guy, like I'm trying to win my league here, right? I want to take the guy that if he hits, I'm going all the way to the ship.
So you don't
So
get any points for sixth place.
right. Exactly. Like let's go for it. So I understand what you're saying there. I think he has the potential to do it. That had to be one of your tougher calls.
No, that was by far the toughest. And I would say that the tough calls were that one, Trask, and then the Georgia one. Those were the three toughest ones for me, that I think you can make a reasonable argument on both sides.
All right. So after this quick ad break, we will come back and we'll talk about what it's like to recruit a stud quarterback after you've just recruited a stud quarterback. And maybe, if we don't run out of time, we'll also talk about our playoff vote that we had at 24/7 Sports. All right, and we're back. So Barton, we're going to come back with another article that you wrote this week, or last week, but we didn't get to talk about it last week. So you wrote a piece I thought was really interesting about the process and challenges of recruiting a stud quarterback after you just sign one who's like a bona fide no doubter type.
Yeah, we just sort of alluded to like the quarterback environment, the fluid nature of the transfer portal, and the newfound motivation that kids have to sort of seize their opportunity to play wherever it might be. And because of those things, because we're in an era where quarterbacks can compete for a starting job earlier than ever based on the continuity of system and style between high school, college, and even the NFL, because coaches are more equipped to hand them the keys. Like I think we're seeing more quarterbacks than ever being willing to sort of follow up elite players, muck up a room. But because of that, because the transfer element, I think the quarterback recruiting is more delicate, nuanced than ever. And so I sort of dug into what we've seen from, and I defined it as splash quarterback. So either he was a 5-star coming out of high school, or he was a guy that was clearly one of the top quarterbacks in the country as a true freshman, and was clearly going to be a guy that was entrenched as a starter moving forward. And sometimes those two aligned, and they were both. But either or sort of defined for me what the splash quarterbacks were. And so the idea is like how do you recruit a quarterback after the splash guy? And so I think that there's identified like kind of a few different ways. Like one is the Clemson way, which is I think the best way if you're just, but all these are difficult. Like you can't just pick a path. It's not choose your own adventure. Like you also have to execute the plan, and it's really, really difficult to do. Clemson, they've had their guy. We'll start it with Deshaun Watson. They had their guy. They recruited behind him a local upside player in Kelly Bryant. Kelly Bryant was very athletic, very productive, but he also wasn't a national name. And so they take a shot on him, develop him. If he turns into the dude, he turns into the dude. He turns into a really good player, but not quite the guy. And behind Kelly Bryant, not directly behind him, but I think a couple years after, was they drafted recruited Hunter Johnson. Again, another 5-star kid. And immediately after Hunter Johnson came Trevor Lawrence, 5-star kid. That's a 5-star beating out a 5-star there. When Trevor Lawrence's opportunity arrives, Kelly Bryant's there. He beats him out. So Trevor Lawrence is clearly the guy. Tyson Pumashan comes in. That's another, again, not a guy that's ready to play right away, similar to Kelly Bryant. He's your guy you sit and you groom. And next year would be Tyson's year, assuming he doesn't get beat out by DJ Uiagalelei, who is the most recent 5-star. So they go like 5-star development, 5-star development, 5-star, 5-star. And then like this year after DJ, they've committed a kid named Bubba Chandler, who's like a former baseball commit, who is a kind of a late blooming quarterback that is going to be content sitting behind DJ for a couple of years and developing. And so by doing it that way, I think there's like a perfect rhythm to it. There's you get your elite players, you get some upside for if the developmental guys hit, and you also have sort of an understanding from those guys that they're not going to play right away. And I think like no one else has been able to accomplish this, and I think that that's why this sort of stands alone as like the program that's recruiting the best, because not only they have good players, but they also have depth in their room over the last few years in addition to good players.
I think Clemson's model is I think it's fine. Do you think it is the best process model, or do you think like was it hard for you to separate results from process here? Because like they've nailed it.
Well, again, how do you separate process when you're talking about like they recruit 5-star guys and they space them out, and so
sure.
I think I'm not gonna like it's hard to tell anyone like the best process in recruiting the quarterback is to recruit the number 1 player in the country in every 3 years, and it's like, well, okay, thanks for the tip, bud. Like that's pretty tough to do. So yeah, I mean, I think I'm okay with the process being with praising the process, but I have to acknowledge like the process is virtually impossible for most teams to achieve. What would be your critique of the Clemson approach?
Well, so I think if we are under the assumption that they are trying to get the best guy every year, but then they are strategic in their fallback plan, I don't really have one, right? If I just don't want people to think that Clemson is strategically only trying to go for a stud every couple of years, right? Like they certainly are looking to get the best player every year. But I think the beauty of their process here has been when they realize they're not going to get the 5-star to follow the 5-star for the next year, they go get somebody who's likely to stick around for a year or two, because he's not somebody who comes in believing that not that he doesn't want to play right away, but like he's not one of these guys that comes in believing, hey, I'm going to either play year 1 or I'm going to transfer. And there are certainly kids like that. So I think their process of finding the right fit is good there as their fallback. Clearly, like the ideal process is probably like Georgia, but their results have not been anywhere close to as good on the field as Clemson's have been.
So 2019, after Trevor Lawrence, Clemson offered 5 quarterbacks. They offered Graham Mertz, Brendan Clark, Bo Nix, Sam Howell, and Tyson Pumashan. I think, and then they zeroed in on Tyson, I mean, fairly early. And I think like there's something to be said for like, you know what, like I do think that there's an element of acknowledging, look, we got Trevor Lawrence sitting right here. We understand what the recruiting climate is going to be for us to recruit after Trevor Lawrence. Tyson was the lowest rated of all those guys, with the exception of Brendan Clark, actually. And he is like very clearly, I'd say he's very clearly among that crew, the highest risk, most raw, I guess, of that
Yeah.
group. And so I think that's, I don't know, I guess that could just be coincidental, but I read that as Clemson being like, look, we're not going to just, chase ghosts out here trailing Trevor Lawrence. Like, let's go get the kid that you can get a nice return on if you invest in him, and acknowledge that like we're not going to have to battle off the big dogs in college football for him. This is a guy that's, we can develop. He has high upside, but he's not ready right now, and he's not going to expect to play for a couple years.
I think that's fair. We should also note that in that particular year, I think we had only one 5-star quarterback, right? Just Rattler.
That was the Rattler year. That's fair. Like it wasn't a great year at the top, at the quarterback position. That's true.
But I thought this was a really cool article. I mean, it's not necessarily one of those pieces that's going to do a million page views, but I think it's something that we can reference over time. We can go back and look back at it. We can update it. And it's the process of all this had to be fun to write.
Yeah. I mean, it was hard to organize. It's hard to figure out exactly how to write it. The other approach is George's approach of just like getting as many guys as possible, letting the chips fall, sifting through it, seeing who's left standing at the end. Like get Jacob Eason, get Jake Fromm, then get Justin Fields, and then whoever wins. And you got to pick the right guy. And again, not everyone can do that approach either, because you got to be able to recruit those sort of guys. But they've done the same thing in the transfer portal too. Get Jamie Newman, get JT Daniels, arguably the two best transfers out there. And then there's like, you can also just sort of dig up 3 stars that are really good players. And that's happened as well. I thought, to me, like when you talk about it has to be fun to write, it was the eureka moment. Like the thing that I thought was really startling when I kind of came across it was the stat I dug up, which is, let's see, I'll just read the paragraph. Beginning with National Signing Day 2012, there have been 7 quarterbacks with a composite rating over 92 that have followed a splash quarterback from the previous class. So basically a highly regarded quarterback that has followed a highly regarded quarterback. 6 of them have been drafted or are projected to be drafted. So to me, like that's a startling stat, that at the quarterback position, a position that generally speaking is a tough one to project, 6 of 7 highly regarded players that have followed highly regarded players have hit. Now the point is they haven't always hit at the school they joined. But I thought that was a telling stat in terms of what it reveals about the quarterbacks that are confident in their abilities. You got Trevor Lawrence following Hunter Johnson. He beat him out. Justin Fields followed Jake Fromm, lost that job, but he's going to be in the first round next year. Kyler Murray followed Kyle Allen. They both sort of left Texas A&M. Tua followed Jalen Hurts, who had just got done leading his team to a national championship game. Fromm followed Eason, who just got done starting as a true freshman at Georgia. Malik Zaire, there's the one miss, followed Gunnar Kiel. And then Jalen Hurts followed Blake Barnett. I know that doesn't sound like much now, but Blake Barnett at that time was a 5-star quarterback going in. And Blake Barnett actually was the starter. I mean, he started the first game of the year, and obviously was deer in headlight, and Jalen Hurts took over for him. But like he had the job was not open for Jalen Hurts, and so I thought that sort of list of players as the only ones that followed a splash quarterback that were highly regarded, it tells you a lot about them and maybe explain some of their success.
Man, that is a good list. And looking at this, I'm trying to look at like what the commonalities are of these guys who followed, other than that they're all kind of fearless, is clearly something that I think maybe having the fortitude to follow somebody like that, whether or not you stick there, but just I think the initial belief in yourself and the confidence, maybe there's something to that as a quarterback that allows you to say, you know what, I'm going to go win the job somewhere else now. Like if I'm not going to stay here and win this, I'm going to go somewhere else and succeed.
Well, and that's one of my biggest pet peeves when people talk about, oh yeah, he's real confident, real competitive, tucked tail and ran as soon as he lost the job. It's like, man, that to me, that is uh, such a misrepresentation of what it means to be a competitor. Like those guys went in and they tried to compete for the job. Like Justin Fields lost to Jake Fromm. Like the path to the field wasn't there. And so, yes, you can be a competitive person and stay and keep on battling, but like the a competitive instinct is also, I'm going to go get on the field and play and show you why I'm really good. And like that's, yeah, Jalen Hurts transferred from Alabama. Well, guess what? It's like that was the easiest call in America to do for Jalen Hurts. I mean, Kyler Murray, like that was a complicated situation at Texas A&M, but he went and he waited behind Baker Mayfield, and then he got his chance. He competed. Like I think being a competitor means wanting to compete. And if you're not given an opportunity, and if the path to the field is blocked, and it's been made clear by a coach that they value someone over you, and it's okay to go and want to play somewhere else. Like that does not make you that does not ding your competitive nature. I think it if anything, it validates your competitive nature.
And if anything, just if we can harken back to our draft episode, I mean, Barton, like the one position where, and also our transfer ratings episode, like the one position that is getting drafted very high in the draft following a transfer is quarterback, right? Like it implicit in the whole, like he doesn't want to stay and compete discussion is sort of this automatic assumption that these college coaches are making the correct decision and playing the best player. And I don't think that we should assume that all the time. Now, do I think more often than not these college coaches are making the right call and selecting the best guy? Yeah, I do. But like, look, Bama chose Blake Barnett over Jalen Hurts until Blake Barnett showed that he couldn't play, right? I mean, like Kirby Smart chose Jake Fromm over Justin Fields. Now, you can tell me that Justin Fields got beaten out, and I believe that. But at the same time, did Justin Fields get a chance in games to show what he can do, or did they use him as like a gadget fake punt guy? I and like
Clay
also
Helton chose Max Brown over Sam Darnold.
Yeah, like if you're going to
all
criticize guys for transferring, like I think we too often assume that the right guy won the job, and I think repeatedly these quarterback transfer success stories are showing us that deciding who's going to be your quarterback is hard. And sometimes these coaches don't get it right. In fact, probably more often than we realize, they don't get it right. So I have no problem with quarterbacks transferring. I want to see which teams are going to be really, really good, kind of using the Oklahoma model, right? Of just going out and trying to get the best transfer quarterback every single year. Maybe that's Georgia with going out and getting Newman and then following it up with Daniels in the same damn year.
Yeah. Yeah, we could be looking at Newman this year, Daniels next year, maybe next two, and then then you've had 2 years to recruit your next transfer quarterback and make, I mean, it's who knows? Like it's an interesting approach for sure.
Have we looked at the hit rate of 5-star quarterbacks who transfer versus the hit rate of 5-star quarterbacks who don't?
No, this might not be a bad idea.
I think we should do that. Like,
I mean, there's some busts that transfer too.
For sure.
Yeah. So
I have no doubt the hit rate will be lower if you do transfer.
Yeah.
But how much lower will it be? Like, do you think I wonder what the percentage of guys, 5-star quarterbacks who stay get drafted as compared to the 5-star quarterbacks who transfer get drafted. You think it's twice as often? 3 times as often? I don't know.
I mean, I'm thinking of there are some transferred quarterbacks, 5-star quarterbacks coming to mind that didn't hit. So I mean, there's plenty of them, but
for sure,
it would be an interesting to just dig and just see what you find.
I think I will. By the way, great graphic there by Ted on your article today with the fighter pilot.
One.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we have a bus driver element there? Like I wish you would have put somebody like driving the bus.
Just someone put in the yellow bus. Just put a hat on.
Oh man, that'd be awesome. All right.
How much time? Where are we at? How much time we got?
I think we're like over an hour.
All right, so we should probably call it for the day.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we will save the playoff boat for the next episode. Really appreciate y'all listening to Barton and Bud. Over 400 5-star reviews now on Apple Podcast. Again, we're available Apple Podcast, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Podcast, Spotify, pretty much any other podcast app that you know of. Keep showing us the love. We're seeing our subscriber numbers go up. If you do listen to us on the website, if you're one of those folks who listen to us while you click on an article, go ahead and search for us on your podcast app, or just hit one of those subscribe buttons there that you see on your screen, and we certainly appreciate it. So, Barton, I'll see you next time.